The Beacon Point Lighthouse had been dark for 43 years. It stood on a rocky cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, its white paint peeling, its windows shattered, its light extinguished since 1980. The Coast Guard had automated the navigation systems, and the old lighthouse became nothing more than a landmark for tourists who never got close enough to see how broken it really was. But on a freezing December night in 2023, a light flickered in the keeper's room at the top of that abandoned lighthouse. And inside, 76-year-old Dorothy Hayes sat wrapped in blankets, holding a discovery that would change everything she thought she knew about her life. What she found in that room wasn't just history. It was her story. And the truth would force her to confront the biggest lie she had ever been told. Stay with me, because this is a story about loss, secrets, and the unexpected places where we find ourselves. Dorothy Hayes had been a teacher for 42 years. She taught English literature at Seaside High School, inspiring generations of students to love books the way she did. She lived alone in a small cottage 3 miles from the ocean, surrounded by thousands of books and decades of memories. Her husband Richard had died 15 years ago from cancer. They never had children. It was just Dorothy, her books, and the ocean she could hear from her bedroom window every night. Dorothy had always been careful with money. Teachers don't make much, but she saved every penny she could. She planned for retirement. She had a small pension and some savings. It should have been enough. But then came the diagnosis: Stage 3 breast cancer. The treatments were aggressive and expensive. Dorothy's insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough. Hospital bills piled up. Medication costs drained her savings. Within 18 months, everything she had spent a lifetime building was gone. The cottage had to be sold to pay medical bills. Dorothy's pension barely covered her medication. She applied for assistance programs, but the waiting lists were months long. Her distant relatives lived across the country and had their own problems. Dorothy found herself, at 76 years old and cancer-free but broken, standing outside a homeless shelter with a suitcase and nowhere to go. The shelter was full. They told her to come back tomorrow. Maybe there would be space then. Maybe. Dorothy walked. She didn't know where she was going. She just walked along the coastal road as the sun set and the December wind cut through her thin coat. She had been walking for 2 hours when the storm hit. Not snow. Not rain. A nor'easter. The kind of storm that shuts down entire cities. Wind that could knock you off your feet. Rain that felt like needles against your skin. Dorothy needed shelter immediately or she would die out here. That's when she saw it. The Beacon Point Lighthouse, barely visible through the storm, standing on its cliff like a ghost. Dorothy had driven past it 1,000 times. She knew it was abandoned. She knew it was dangerous. But she also knew she had no choice. She climbed the rocky path, slipping twice on wet stones, and finally reached the lighthouse door. It was locked, but the lock was old and rusted. Dorothy had taught literature, but she had grown up poor. She knew how to pick a simple lock with a hairpin. The door opened with a groan that sounded like the building itself was surprised anyone had come. Dorothy stepped inside, and the door slammed shut behind her from the wind. She was in complete darkness. She pulled out her phone. 5% battery. She turned on the flashlight and looked around. The bottom floor of the lighthouse was a wreck. Graffiti covered the walls. Broken glass littered the floor. It smelled like mold and decay. But it was shelter. It was dry. And most importantly, it was empty. Dorothy found the spiral staircase that led up through the center of the lighthouse. 173 steps to the top. To the keeper's room. Dorothy's legs ached. Her body was still weak from chemotherapy. But she started climbing. It took Dorothy 30 minutes to climb those stairs. She had to stop every 20 steps to catch her breath. Her phone died at step 97, plunging her into complete darkness. But Dorothy kept climbing, using the wall to guide her, counting each step until finally she reached the top. The keeper's room. The small living quarters where the lighthouse keeper had once lived, monitoring the light, watching the ocean, keeping sailors safe. Dorothy pushed open the door and felt along the wall. Her hand found something. A camping lantern. Someone had left supplies here. Probably teenagers who used the lighthouse as a hangout spot. Dorothy clicked the lantern on, and warm light filled the small room. It was surprisingly intact. A small bed with a bare mattress, a wooden desk, a chair, a cabinet, and most importantly, it was warmer up here, protected from the wind. Dorothy collapsed onto the bed and let herself cry for the first time since losing everything. She cried for her home. She cried for her husband who wasn't here to help her. She cried for the life she had worked so hard to build that had crumbled in 18 months. And she cried because she was 76 years old and sleeping in an abandoned lighthouse because she had nowhere else to go. When the tears finally stopped, Dorothy wiped her face and looked around the room more carefully. The camping lantern wasn't the only thing here. There was a sleeping bag in the corner, canned food in the cabinet, bottled water. Someone had been using this room as a shelter, but the dust on everything suggested it had been months since anyone had been here. Dorothy checked the canned food. All still good. She opened a can of soup and ate it cold. It was the first food she'd had in 2 days. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Dorothy was warm and dry and fed. She wrapped herself in the sleeping bag and lay on the bed, listening to the wind howl around the lighthouse. That's when she noticed the desk. There was something carved into the top. Dorothy held the lantern close and read the words. Property of Robert Hayes. Lighthouse Keeper. 1957 to 1980. Dorothy's heart stopped. Hayes. Her married name. But it couldn't be. Could it? Richard's father had died when Richard was a baby. Richard had told her his father was a merchant marine who died at sea. His mother never talked about him. The few times Dorothy asked, her mother-in-law changed the subject. After she died, Richard inherited a few boxes of papers, but he never went through them. They were still in Dorothy's storage unit. The one she couldn't afford to keep paying for. The one that would be auctioned off next month. Dorothy's hands were shaking. She opened the desk drawer. Inside were logbooks. Dozens of them. Lighthouse keeper logs dating from 1957 to 1980. Every single one signed by Robert Hayes. Dorothy opened the first one. January 1st, 1957. First day as keeper of Beacon Point. Nervous but honored. This light will keep sailors safe. I will not fail them. The handwriting was neat and careful. The logs detailed weather conditions, ships that passed, maintenance performed. But starting in 1960, the entries changed. Personal notes began appearing. March 15th, 1960. Saw Ellen today at the market. She's so beautiful. I want to ask her to dinner, but I'm too nervous. April 2nd, 1960. I did it. I asked her. She said yes. We're going to the dance on Saturday. June 10th, 1960. I'm going to marry her. I know I am. She's the one. Dorothy's heart was pounding. Ellen. That was Richard's mother's name. She kept reading. August 20th, 1960. We got married today. Small ceremony. Just us and 2 witnesses. Ellen moved into the lighthouse with me. I've never been so happy. And then, November 3rd, 1960. Ellen told me she's pregnant. I'm going to be a father. I'm terrified and thrilled at the same time. February 15th, 1961. Richard was born today. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. He's perfect. Ellen is exhausted but glowing. I held my son in my arms and promised him I would always protect him. Dorothy stopped reading. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold the logbook. This was Richard's father. Her father-in-law. The man she had never met. The man Richard thought had died at sea. But he hadn't died at sea. He had been a lighthouse keeper. He had lived here. In this room. And he had kept logs. Detailed logs. What else had he written? Before we continue with what Dorothy discovered in those logs, I need you to do something. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, if you're wondering what secrets those logbooks contained, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists to tell the stories of people like Dorothy. People who have lost everything. People who discover that their entire lives were built on lies. Subscribe and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's see what else Robert Hayes wrote in those logs. Dorothy spent the entire night reading the logbooks. The storm outside was forgotten. Her cold and hunger were forgotten. All that mattered were the words written by her father-in-law 40 years ago. The early entries were happy. Robert wrote about his love for Ellen, his joy at being a father, his pride in his work keeping the lighthouse running. But then the tone changed. It started in 1963. March 7th, 1963. Ellen is different lately. Distant. She doesn't smile as much. When I ask what's wrong, she says nothing. But I know it's something. I just don't know what. The entries became more troubled. Ellen was pulling away. She was unhappy. She felt trapped in the lighthouse, isolated from friends and family. Robert tried everything. He suggested they move. She said no. He offered to quit his job. She said that was foolish. He asked what she wanted. She said she didn't know. And then came the entry that made Dorothy's blood run cold. September 14th, 1965. Ellen is leaving. She's taking Richard. She says she can't live here anymore. She says I have to choose. The lighthouse or my family. How can I choose? This lighthouse keeps ships safe. People depend on this light. But my family is everything to me. September 20th, 1965. They're gone. Ellen left this morning with Richard. He's 4 years old. He cried when she put him in the car. He reached for me. And I let them go. Ellen said I could visit. She said she would bring Richard to see me. But I know the truth. She's going to tell him I'm dead. She's going to erase me. And maybe that's better. Maybe he shouldn't have a father who chose a lighthouse over him. Dorothy couldn't breathe. Richard had been told his father died. But his father had been alive, living 30 miles away in this lighthouse. And he had known. Robert had known his wife was going to lie to their son. And he had let it happen. Why? Dorothy kept reading, desperate for answers. October 10th, 1965. I called Ellen today. She hung up. I drove to her apartment. She wouldn't let me in. I saw Richard through the window. He saw me too. He didn't recognize me. It's only been 3 weeks and he's already forgotten his father. November 15th, 1965. I hired a lawyer. I'm going to fight for custody. I'm not going to let her take my son away from me. But the lawyer was honest. Ellen has witnesses who will testify that I chose my job over my family. That I was never home. That I cared more about the lighthouse than about them. And it's not entirely untrue. I did work long hours. I was obsessed with keeping the light running perfectly. But it was because I wanted to provide for them, to keep them safe. How did caring too much become proof that I didn't care enough? December 3rd, 1965. I lost. The judge awarded Ellen full custody. I get no visitation rights. Ellen claimed I was unstable, that I was obsessed with the lighthouse to the point of mental illness. The judge believed her. I'm allowed no contact with Richard. If I try to see him, I'll be arrested. My son is 4 years old and I will never see him again. Dorothy set down the logbook and stared at the wall. Her husband had been stolen from his father. Ellen had lied. She had told Richard his father was dead, when really, he was alive and desperate to see his son. Dorothy felt rage building inside her. But she also felt confusion. Why had Ellen done this? Why lie? Why keep father and son apart? Dorothy picked up the next logbook. 1966. The entries were shorter now, darker. Robert was sinking into depression. January 1st, 1966. Another year without my son. I maintain the light. I do my job. But I'm hollow inside. The light shines for everyone but me. The years passed in the logs. Robert kept working, kept the lighthouse running. Kept hoping that someday Richard would come looking for him. But he never did. And then Dorothy found the entry that explained everything. July 22nd, 1978. Ellen is sick. Cancer. Terminal. I found out through a mutual friend. She has 6 months at most. Richard is 17 now. Almost a man. I've been writing letters to him for 13 years. Hundreds of letters. I never sent them. But maybe now is the time. Maybe before Ellen dies, she'll tell him the truth. Maybe she'll let me see him one last time. August 15th, 1978. Ellen died yesterday. I went to the funeral. Stood in the back. Richard was there. He's so tall now. Looks just like me. He stood by the casket and cried. I wanted to go to him. Wanted to tell him I'm his father. But he thinks I'm dead. If I told him now, it would destroy him. He just lost his mother. How can I tell him his entire childhood was a lie? So I left. I walked away from my son for the second time in his life. Dorothy was crying now. Richard had been 17 when his mother died. He'd spent the rest of his life believing his father had died when he was a baby. But his father had been at the funeral. His father had been alive. His father had walked away to protect him from the truth. And Richard never knew. He married Dorothy, built a life, and died at 67 never knowing his father had loved him, had wanted him, had sacrificed everything for him. I need to pause here for a moment because what Dorothy is experiencing right now is something profound. She's learning that her entire marriage was built on a lie, that her husband died never knowing the truth about his father. If this story is affecting you, if you're thinking about the secrets in your own family, the things left unsaid, I want you to hit that like button right now. And leave a comment. Tell me about the family secrets you've discovered. Tell me about the things you wish you had known. This community is here to share these stories together. Now, let's see what Dorothy does with this information. Dorothy couldn't stop reading. She went through every single logbook. Robert Hayes had maintained the Lighthouse until 1980 when it was finally automated and shut down. His final entry was heartbreaking. December 31st, 1980. Last night at Beacon Point. The light will be automated tomorrow. I've spent 23 years in this lighthouse. 23 years keeping sailors safe. 23 years without my son. I'm 62 years old. I have no family. No friends. Just this lighthouse. And now I don't even have that. I don't know what I'll do. Where I'll go. Who I'll be without this light. There were no more logbooks after that. But Dorothy wasn't done searching. She opened every drawer in the desk. Every cabinet in the room. And then she found it. A metal box hidden in the back of the bottom drawer. Dorothy pulled it out. It was locked, but the key was taped to the bottom. Inside were letters. Hundreds of letters. All addressed to Richard Hayes. All stamped but never mailed. Dorothy's hands shook as she picked up the first one. Dear Richard, you turned 5 today. I don't know if your mother told you about me. I don't know if you know I exist. But I want you to know that I think about you every single day. I imagine what you look like. What games you play. What makes you laugh. I wonder if you like the ocean the way I do. I wonder if you're happy. I hope you're happy. That's all I want for you. Love, your father. Dorothy read letter after letter. 23 years of letters. Birthday letters. Christmas letters. Letters about important moments Robert had missed. Your first day of school. Your graduation from middle school. Your first girlfriend. I wasn't there for any of it. But I want you to know I was thinking of you. Always thinking of you. The letters were beautiful and heartbreaking. Robert had poured his soul into them. Every hope. Every regret. Every ounce of love he had for the son he never got to raise. The last letter was dated December 31st, 1980. The same date as the final logbook entry. Dear Richard, you're 19 now. A man. You probably don't remember me at all. Your mother told you I was dead, and in a way she was right. The man I was when you were born died the day you left. But I want you to know something. Every ship that passed this lighthouse safely, every sailor who made it home to their family because they saw this light, I did that for you. I kept this light burning for 19 years because I couldn't keep you safe, but I could keep others safe. And maybe that mattered. Maybe that was enough. I'm leaving the lighthouse tomorrow. I don't know where I'll go, but I'm leaving these letters here. Someday, maybe you'll find them. Maybe you'll know that your father loved you, that he always loved you, that he never stopped loving you. Dorothy sat on the floor of the keeper's room, surrounded by letters, and sobbed. Richard had died never knowing his father had loved him, had thought about him every day, had written to him for 23 years. Ellen's lie had stolen that from both of them. Dorothy felt rage at her mother-in-law, but she also felt something else. A desperate need to find out what happened to Robert Hayes after he left the lighthouse. Dorothy waited for the storm to pass. It took 2 days. She rationed the canned food and water. She read every letter again and again. And when the storm finally ended and the sun came out, Dorothy climbed down the 173 steps and walked back to town. She went straight to the public library. She needed to find Robert Hayes. She needed to know what happened to him. The librarian helped her search newspaper archives and public records. And what Dorothy found broke her heart all over again. Robert Hayes had died in 1982, just 2 years after leaving the lighthouse. He had been living in a small apartment in a neighboring town. He died alone. No family. No friends. The newspaper obituary was 3 lines long. Robert Hayes, 64, former lighthouse keeper, died of a heart attack. No survivors. Funeral arrangements private. Dorothy stared at that obituary and felt something crack inside her chest. This man had died alone and forgotten, just like she almost had, just like so many people do. But then Dorothy had a thought. Richard had been alive in 1982. He would have been 21. If Robert's obituary had been published, Richard could have seen it. Could have known his father hadn't died in 1960. Could have known his mother had lied. Dorothy searched for more information, and she found something that made her gasp. Richard had attended Robert's funeral. There was a photo in the local newspaper. A small funeral. Only 3 people. The funeral director, a priest, and a young man standing alone by the casket. The caption read, "Robert Hayes is laid to rest." Attendees include his estranged son, Richard Hayes. Dorothy couldn't believe it. Richard had known. Somehow, he had found out his father was alive. He had gone to the funeral. But he had never told Dorothy. In 40 years of marriage, he had never mentioned it. Why? What had happened at that funeral? What had Richard learned? Dorothy needed answers. But Richard was dead. Ellen was dead. Robert was dead. Everyone who knew the truth was gone. Except, Dorothy remembered the boxes. The boxes Richard had inherited from his mother. The boxes Dorothy had put in storage and couldn't afford to keep. The boxes that were going to be auctioned off next month. Those boxes might have answers. Dorothy is about to discover something that will change everything she thought she knew about her marriage. But before we get there, I need you to understand something. This story is about more than just secrets. It's about the choices we make, the lies we tell to protect people, the truths we hide because we think they'll cause more harm than good. If you've ever kept a secret to protect someone, if you've ever wondered if you did the right thing, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. And make sure you're subscribed because the ending of Dorothy's story will leave you speechless. Now, let's see what was in those boxes. Dorothy had $12 to her name. The storage unit fee was $85 per month. She was 3 months behind. The unit was scheduled to be auctioned in 2 weeks. Dorothy needed that money. She went to the homeless shelter and asked if they had any programs to help. They connected her with a social worker who managed to get her emergency housing assistance. A tiny efficiency apartment, barely bigger than the keeper's room at the lighthouse. But it was hers for 3 months while she figured things out. Dorothy took every odd job she could find. She cleaned houses. She walked dogs. She helped students with tutoring. In 2 weeks, she scraped together $255. Enough to pay the back fees on the storage unit and keep it for 1 more month. She went to the storage facility, paid the manager, and opened Unit 247. Inside were the boxes from Richard's mother. 13 boxes of papers, photographs, and belongings Ellen had kept. Dorothy started going through them systematically. Most of it was mundane. Tax documents, old bills, photographs of Richard as a child. But then Dorothy found a shoebox in the bottom of the 7th box. Inside were letters. Letters from Robert to Ellen. Letters from Robert to Richard. And letters from Ellen to Robert. Letters that had been sent and received. Letters that told a story Dorothy hadn't known existed. She started reading. The letters from Robert to Ellen were dated from 1966 to 1978. Please let me see him. Just once. I won't tell him who I am. I just want to see my son. Ellen's responses were cold. You made your choice. You chose the Lighthouse. Richard doesn't need a father who abandons him. But as Dorothy read further, she found something that changed everything. A letter from Ellen dated 1975. Robert, I need to tell you the truth. I lied to you. I lied to Richard. And I've carried this lie for 15 years. I'm dying now. Cancer. The doctors say I have a year at most. And I can't die with this lie. Dorothy's heart was pounding. What lie? She kept reading. The truth is, I didn't leave because you chose the Lighthouse over us. I left because I was having an affair. There was another man. Thomas. He worked at the bank. We had been seeing each other for months. I got pregnant. I didn't know if the baby was yours or his. When Richard was born, I did a blood test. He was yours. But I was in love with Thomas. I wanted to be with him. But he didn't want to raise another man's child. So I had to choose. I chose Thomas. I made you the villain. I told everyone you were obsessed with your job, that you ignored your family, that you were unstable, and you believed it. You blamed yourself. But it was me. It was always me. I destroyed our family because I was selfish and weak. Dorothy dropped the letter. Her hands were shaking. Ellen had lied. She had lied about everything. Robert Hayes hadn't abandoned his family. He had been betrayed by his wife and then blamed for her betrayal. And he had believed it. He had spent 23 years thinking he was a bad father, thinking he had chosen wrong. But he hadn't chosen anything. The choice had been made for him. Dorothy kept reading. Ellen's letter continued. Thomas left me 6 months after I left you. He said I was too much work, too needy. I was alone with Richard. I couldn't go back to you. I had burned that bridge. So I lied to Richard. I told him you were dead. It was easier than explaining the truth. And I told myself I was protecting him. But I was really protecting myself. I'm telling you this now because I'm dying. Because you deserve to know the truth. Because Richard deserves to know the truth. I've written him a letter. I'm going to give it to him after I'm gone. He'll finally know what kind of mother I really was. Dorothy frantically searched through the rest of the box. Where was Ellen's letter to Richard? Did he ever get it? And then she found it. Still sealed. Still unread. The envelope was addressed to Richard Hayes. To be opened after my death. But it had never been opened. Dorothy's mind raced. Ellen had died in 1978. Richard had gone to Robert's funeral in 1982. 4 years later. Had he known the truth? Or had he died never knowing? Dorothy carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter written in Ellen's shaky handwriting. My dearest Richard, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And it's time you knew the truth. Your father didn't abandon us. I took you away from him. I lied to you. I lied to everyone. Your father loved you more than anything in this world. He kept the lighthouse running because he was a good man who took his responsibilities seriously. But he would have given it up for us in a heartbeat if I had asked. I never asked. I just left. And I made him the villain. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Your father's name is Robert Hayes. He's the keeper of Beacon Point Lighthouse. If he's still alive when you read this, please go to him. Tell him you know the truth. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I wish I had been brave enough to tell the truth when it mattered. Your mother, Ellen. Dorothy sat in the storage unit, surrounded by boxes and lies, and understood. Richard had found this letter after his mother died. He had learned the truth. He had gone to find his father. But by the time he got there, Robert was working at the lighthouse. Or maybe he had already left. And when Robert died in 1982, Richard went to the funeral. He stood by the casket of the father he had never really known. The father who had loved him his entire life from a distance. And Richard had kept that pain to himself. He never told Dorothy. He carried that grief alone until the day he died. Dorothy wept. For Robert. For Richard. For Ellen. For all the wasted years. For all the love that had been stolen by pride and lies and fear. And then Dorothy made a decision. She couldn't change the past, but she could honor it. She could make sure Robert Hayes wasn't forgotten. She could tell his story. She could make sure people knew what he had sacrificed, what he had endured. She gathered every letter, every logbook, every photograph, and she took them back to the lighthouse. Dorothy returned to Beacon Point Lighthouse with a purpose. The storm had passed, but her mission was just beginning. She climbed the 173 steps again, carrying boxes of letters and logbooks. The keeper's room became her project. She cleaned it, organized it, created a timeline of Robert Hayes's life on the walls using photographs and excerpts from his logs. She was building a memorial, a testament to a man who had been forgotten. But Dorothy needed help. She couldn't do this alone. She went to the local historical society and told them about Robert Hayes, about the lighthouse keeper who had maintained Beacon Point for 23 years, about the letters he had written to his son, about the sacrifice he had made. The historical society was fascinated. They sent volunteers to help Dorothy. They brought supplies. They brought expertise. They brought attention. A local journalist heard about the project and wrote an article. Retired lighthouse keeper's story discovered by homeless widow. The article went viral. People were moved by Robert's story, by Dorothy's dedication. Donations started coming in, not just for the lighthouse memorial, but for Dorothy herself. People wanted to help the woman who was honoring her father-in-law's memory. Within 2 weeks, Dorothy had enough money to rent a proper apartment. Within a month, a publisher reached out about turning Robert's story into a book. But the most surprising response came from the Coast Guard. They had read about Robert Hayes. They had looked up his service records. And they discovered something remarkable. In his 23 years as lighthouse keeper, Robert had maintained a perfect safety record. Not a single ship had wrecked near Beacon Point during his tenure. In storms that had caused wrecks at other lighthouses, Beacon Point's light had stayed on. Robert Hayes had been one of the best lighthouse keepers in the region's history. And nobody had known. Nobody had honored him. Until now. The Coast Guard agreed to help restore the lighthouse as a memorial. The keeper's room would become a museum dedicated to Robert Hayes and to all lighthouse keepers who had served. Dorothy would be the curator. She would have a salary, benefits, a purpose. At 76 years old, after losing everything, Dorothy had found a new life. A life dedicated to making sure Robert Hayes and people like him were never forgotten. The memorial opened 6 months after Dorothy first took shelter in the lighthouse. Hundreds of people came. Former students of Dorothy's, members of the Historical Society, representatives from the Coast Guard, and one person Dorothy never expected. A young man in his 30s approached her during the opening ceremony. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "I'm Michael Thomas. I think I'm your nephew." Dorothy stared at him. "Nephew? I'm Ellen's grandson," Michael explained. My father was Richard's half-brother. Ellen had another son after she left Robert. His name was David. My father. He died 5 years ago, but before he died, he told me about Richard. About Robert. About the lies our grandmother told. I never got to meet Richard. But I wanted to meet you. I wanted to see what you built here. I wanted to honor our family's history. Even the painful parts. Dorothy broke down crying. She had thought she was alone in the world. But here was family she never knew existed. Family that wanted to connect. Wanted to heal. Michael spent the day with Dorothy, learning about Robert and Richard. And when the memorial closed for the evening, Michael made Dorothy an offer. I have a spare room in my house. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it. Your family. And family doesn't let family live alone. We're almost at the end of Dorothy's journey, but I want you to think about something. Dorothy lost everything. Her home. Her health. Her security. She ended up in an abandoned lighthouse in the middle of a storm. And she found purpose. She found family. She found meaning. Sometimes our darkest moments lead us to exactly where we need to be. If this story has touched you, if you believe that every person's story matters, I need you to subscribe right now. Share this video. Leave a comment telling me what this story meant to you. And stay with me, because Dorothy's story has one more twist you won't see coming. Dorothy accepted Michael's offer. She moved into his spare room while continuing to work as curator of the Robert Hayes Memorial at Beacon Point Lighthouse. The book about Robert's life was published and became a regional bestseller. Schools started bringing students to the lighthouse to learn about history, sacrifice, and the importance of truth. Dorothy gave talks. She shared Robert's letters. She made sure his story lived on. But something was bothering Dorothy. The lighthouse itself was still dark. It had been automated in 1980, and even the automated light had been deactivated in 1995 when GPS made it obsolete. The tower stood dark on its cliff, a memorial but not a beacon. And Dorothy felt that was wrong. Robert Hayes had dedicated his life to keeping that light burning. The light should burn again. Not for navigation, but for memory, for hope, for all the people like Robert who had been forgotten. Dorothy started a campaign. She contacted the Coast Guard, the Historical Society, local government. She argued that the light should be reactivated as a memorial beacon. Not bright enough to confuse ships, but bright enough to be seen. To remind people that there are lights in the darkness. That there are people who dedicate their lives to helping others. That sacrifice matters. It took 18 months of paperwork, fundraising, and negotiation. But finally, permission was granted. On December 15, 2025, exactly 2 years after Dorothy first took shelter in the lighthouse, a ceremony was held. The light would be turned on for the first time in 30 years. Dorothy stood in the keeper's room, her hand on the switch that would activate the light. Michael stood beside her. Representatives from the Coast Guard were there. The mayor, Dorothy's former students, journalists, and hundreds of community members who had been touched by Robert Hayes' story. Dorothy gave a short speech. Robert Hayes kept this light burning for 23 years, she said. He did it because he believed every life mattered. Every sailor out there deserved a chance to make it home safely. He sacrificed time with his son. He sacrificed his own happiness. Because he believed in service, in duty, in love. Tonight, we light this beacon again. Not to guide ships, but to remind ourselves, to remind the world, that there are still people who care, still people who sacrifice, still people who keep lights burning in the darkness. This light is for Robert, for Richard, for everyone who has ever felt forgotten. You are not forgotten. Your light still shines. Dorothy flipped the switch, and for the first time in 30 years, the Beacon Point Lighthouse lit up. The beams swept across the dark ocean, bright and steady and strong. The crowd erupted in cheers. People cried. People hugged. And Dorothy stood in the keeper's room where she had first found Robert's logbooks, and felt her husband's presence beside her. She had done it. She had honored his father. She had made sure the truth was told. She had kept the light burning. Dorothy Hayes is 78 years old now. She lives with her nephew Michael and his family. She works 3 days a week as curator of the Robert Hayes Memorial. She gives tours. She answers questions. She shares the letters Robert wrote to his son. And every evening at sunset, she climbs the 173 steps to the keeper's room and watches the light begin its nightly sweep across the ocean. The lighthouse has become more than